Okay, a few things tonight. Three things, I guess. The first thing is this. I've continued developing the shapes of these trees back here and bringing some color from the background. I'm happier with it now than I was. Quite a bit, actually. I quite like it. Now comes another tedious job of filling in these areas without too much light, but still with a bit of color. I like the idea of possibly taking this sliver here and making a bigger dip here and then up as we get to these trees. Because I kind of like to have the feeling of coming through here, turning right, and then going down the hill. So I might get rid of this and I might just cut in a bit of more distant, the next plane of hillside here. But that plane and this plane will be quite similar. I don't want it to be so obvious because I don't want the differentiation between the two planes to be as great as what I have up here. Happy with that. I'm pecking away at it is really all I'm doing. Okay, the second thing, I promised to show you this before and I didn't, but I'll show it to you now because I actually remembered, is this little painting is finished now. Let me back it off, back it off, back it off, back it off. There. Trying to do it without glare. Okay, that's done. I wanted, there was a lot of weight on the top here before, and I needed to lighten it up. I needed this light to poke up into the sky a little bit, and make maybe this area here a little more interesting. So that's what I did. I'm happy with it now. Changed the water slightly, just with a few streaks, but boy, pretty zoomed in here. I like that. I'm happy with that. It's a great little study. Well, okay. I'm not going to toot my own horn. Let's just say I'm very happy with it. Third thing. I got a question. Let me just go to my computer here, which is what my daughter called it when she was 3 years old or 2 years old. It's a good question. This question comes from Broody58. I bought a hardware store boiled linseed oil, used it to paint, tried to glaze transparent color over parts. It all beads up like water on wax. I'm wondering if there is wax in it. If it's not the oil, I can't figure out why it's beading. M. Harding Paints. Okay, I guess that's the brand. So I thin a lot because it's thick. So you're thinning the oil off because the boiled linseed oil is thick. Yes, boiled linseed oil is thicker than raw linseed oil. But it covers really opaque. Great stuff thin. Well, opaque would be blocking color. I'm guessing that it covers, it covers whatever's underneath it, yeah, pretty heavily. Maybe that's in itself the problem. Too smooth of a dried surface from thinning so much. I really like glazed colors, so this has been holding me back. I've asked others, no one really knows. I'm going to buy some cold press oil, see if there is a difference. Yes, oil. Oh yeah, important thing. I've heard about combustion, chemical reaction somehow, terrible risk. Okay, all good points. You kind of got me there. I've never come across that. I've never come across the situation where, let me back the camera off so that I can gesticulate and pretend that I'm orating. I've never come across the idea that you have a painting done with oils, whether you've added linseed oil or not. I mean, linseed oil is very typical of a carrying agent for oil paints. So if you add linseed oil over linseed oil, they should bond just fine. One of the bigger problems can be if you you should go fat over lean. The more coats you put on an oil painting, the more oil should be in those coats. The fatter, the fatter, the fatter as you get closer to what will be the final surface of the painting. Anyway, let's back up a couple of steps here. So linseed oil comes pretty much, it's marketed, it's sold in two forms. Raw linseed oil, which is what he refers to as, or she refers to, I'm not sure, as cold press. It hasn't been reduced. It hasn't been sort of run through a still. It hasn't been reduced through boiling. Moisture hasn't been taken out of it. No spirits have been evaporated from it through the boiling process. So it hasn't been reduced and made heavier and thicker. Raw linseed oil what did I just say? If you boil it, you reduce it, you make it thicker. It becomes an oil that dries much more quickly and is much more subject to spontaneous combustion. It's the more dangerous of the two. So you have raw linseed oil and boiled linseed oil. The raw linseed oil can also be used for wood. Boiled linseed oil, that's a good finish for wood, but that's pretty much the arena in which it should be used. Raw linseed oil can also be used. I use raw linseed oil on some of my woodwork because I've got it in the studio anyway, right? But it dries much more slowly, and it's a little safer to use. Not that oil's dangerous, just make sure you leave your rags outside in the air to avoid the fire problem. But I like the raw. It's a little thinner. It soaks into the wood better. I know that often woodworkers will, once they've sanded and they've got the oil, the wood surface to the point that they want it, they will actually lay on linseed oil and then heat it with a torch or a heat gun to heat the wood up, maybe to warm up the linseed oil as well to make it more liquid. And then let it cool down and soak up the linseed oil. It is the cooling down process that sucks the linseed oil in through capillary action, sort of, well, mostly, and that's sort of the benefit of once you've got it on and it's fresh. When things cool down, it sucks that oil into the fibers. Does a great job. Seals things very well. Often people will wax once the linseed oil is in and you've applied it a few times. They'll finish with a wood wax or something. That's great too. But we're talking about oil painting. We're talking about that arena of only oil painting. So raw linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, both fine for wood finishing. Oil painting, stay away from boiled oil. Stick with the raw linseed or cold press, as you call it. They're the same thing. Now, I wrote some stuff down here so I wouldn't forget, because I forget like within 20 seconds. Okay. I did not grab a 16 by 20 for my next painting. I actually ended up with a visitor today. A good friend of mine. We just sat around and chatted for most of the day, so that was fun. It's only in the last hour or so that I started to fiddle with this, and yep, happy with those results. That feeling of accomplishment is a good thing. Okay, what did I say? Raw versus boiled. We've gone through that. Yeah, actually, somebody responded to his query, or to the query, and let me just, sorry, I don't mean to call you his or her, I don't know, because they're just channel names. Let me just buzz down here. Yeah, Paul Brown, I'll call that a him, 6008, replied to Broody58 and said, try adding some terps to the linseed oil. Depending on the thickness, you may have to do a 50-50 mix. That to me sounds like a reasonable possibility. What I would do though, and it really depends on how, the surface that you're wanting to apply another layer of linseed oil and, thinned off paint. The best thing to do, for one thing, take terps, and I don't mean paint thinner or any solvents or anything like that. Take just straight gum turpentine, artist's quality. Give your canvas or whatever area you're going to paint a wipe to wash off the excess stuff that you've applied to it. And in fact, I would, if you're having problems, I would actually wash any area you're going to paint. I just wash the whole painting, unless it's massive, with turpentine. Cheesecloth, cotton cheesecloth or something like that works really well. And I don't mean pour it on the canvas, never do that. Just soak it, drain it out so that it's just damp with turpentine, and do it several times so that you've cleaned off the excess boiled oil that you put on there. Also, with age, every painting, as it cures, as it oxidizes, gives off oxides which may form a layer that prevents the next layer from adhering to it. So what you do is you wash your painting, go back into it with, and I would suggest, yes, raw linseed oil, and I think it would be helpful to cut it with a little bit of turpentine. Not much. If your last layer was straight linseed oil and paint, to cut it too much with turpentine, you're asking for trouble. The good thing is that turpentine does thin off the oil. I'm assuming this is a painting you've been working on and want to revisit it. If the painting is less than a year old, give it a wash. If it's more than a year old, you absolutely have to give it a wash. All right? If it's 3 months old, I'm finding it amazing that you'd have issues. But if it's less than a year old, like if it's less than 4 months old or 3 months old, there's enough plasticity left in the existing oil paint on the painting. You should be able to give it a wipe with terps and then go back in with oil, whatever color you want, and yes, a little bit of terps. And you shouldn't have a problem. But honestly, I've never heard of that before. That laying linseed oil base over linseed oil dried has given anybody any problems. The painting that you want to revisit, is it in process now or has it been varnished? If it's been varnished, that changes the game completely. There's also the possibility of a mix of turpentine and damar, or damar as different people will pronounce it. Very good stuff. It makes a good varnish, it makes a good retouch varnish. So if you have a layer of that in, that may need to be cleaned off too before you continue with the painting. The whole question comes down to, how recently was the last work that you did on this painting? How old is the paint that you're trying to paint over? It's a big deal, it makes a big difference. It's actually much more complicated than that. I'm not going to get into that. I am not a vastly experienced restorer of old art. I have some training. My dad was a very experienced restorer of old art, but I didn't learn what he knew. So my ability to help you or to offer my advice or my suggestions is somewhat limited. But those are my thoughts. Whatever the surface was, if it's not old paint, don't wash it with turpentine because you'll start wiping paint off of there. But if the painting's been around long enough to be sort of dry, not just dry to the touch, but actually fairly hard when you touch it, say 3 months plus, you should be able to give a very light wipe with turpentine, and then revisit it with I'd say linseed oil. And I agree with adding a bit of turpentine. I don't think I'd want to go to 50-50 because you'll compromise the workmanship. Having said that, it physically will work better the more you thin it off. So, that's my feeling. That's where I'm coming from. That's the best I can think of. Other than that, you have the same source of information I do. You can just Google your question to the internet, and maybe there's something to offer there. I don't know. You'll just have to do some homework. But it's a weird one. Definitely a weird one. I think I've blithered on enough. I don't know that I have any more helpful stuff to say. Hope that works for you. Yeah, I really do, because I know this is weird. Like oil would beat up over something that's oil. Strange. You know, I can also think maybe there's a possibility if you use what do they call it now? Well, it's acrylic / oil. Not amalgam, but a mixture of the two. You know, in a lot of the newer synthesized mixtures, they come up with this stuff. And I don't care what they say. They can't say, oh, it's true, it'll last 60 years, it'll last 500 years, you know, all that baloney. They can't say that because they can recreate in their own minds the conditions of 300 years of aging of paint. Nothing recreates those conditions except for the reality of 300 years of existence, right? We know that. So, that's it. Thanks for the great question. It was a good one. And I'll be having one eye out in the future to see if I come across that again. Anyway, guys, I'm probably going to play a little more on this tonight, and or not. I don't know. Have a good weekend. Talk to you soon.